Brach Leslie. On September the 29th of 1940, two Royal Australian Air Force Avro Anson aeroplanes on a training exercise collided in mid-air above Brach Leslie, New South Wales, Australia. The pilot and reconnaissance officer in the lower aeroplane immediately bailed out, along with the reconnaissance officer of the upper aeroplane. This left only leading aircraftman Leonard Fuller, the pilot of the upper plane, aboard. Both airplanes did not enter a steep dive and crash as expected. Instead, they remained airborne and locked together, with one above the other. The engines of the upper airplane controlled by Fuller had stopped working, but the airplane was kept airborne by the engines of the lower airplane. Fuller soon discovered that he could control the lower engines by simply controlling his airplane. Therefore, he flew both airplanes 8 kilometers before landing in Brach Leslie. The lower airplane was written off after the landing, but the upper airplane was repaired and returned to service. British Airways Flight 5390. On June the 10th of 1990, British Airways Flight 5390 was flying from Birmingham, England to Malaga, Spain, when a cockpit windshield blew out at an altitude of more than 5,200 meters, or 17,000 feet. The sudden loss of pressure sucked Captain Timothy Lancaster out of his seatbelt. He was saved from being blown out of the aeroplane by the quick action of flight attendant Nigel Ogden, who held onto him by the waist. At the same time, Lancaster's legs hit the controls and disconnected the autopilot, sending the airplane into a dive. The first officer recovered the airplane from the dive, but more than half of Lancaster's body remained sprawled over the top of the airplane. The change in pressure had also started dragging Ogden out of the aeroplane, and he was then saved by another flight attendant who held onto his belt. By now, Lancaster's face was furiously banging on the side of the cockpit windshield, and the crew thought he was dead. Someone even suggested that they should release him, but they decided to hold onto him over fears that he might be sucked into the engine and cause more damage. The airplane made an emergency landing at Southampton, England, where Lancaster was found to be alive. He was treated for fractures and frostbite. There was no other major casualties. Philippine Airlines Flight 812. On May the 25th of 2000, Philippine Airlines Flight 812 with 278 passengers and 13 crew members was flying from Davao City to Manila when it was hijacked by a man armed with a gun and a hand grenade. The man, who was later identified as Augusta Lacandula, ordered the pilots to return to Davao. After they told him that they did not have enough fuel, he instructed them to reduce their altitude so that he could jump out. Before jumping, he robbed the passengers of their money and asked the crew to teach him how to use his homemade parachute. One of the pilots realized that his low-quality parachute had no ripcord and quickly made one for the hijacker with the curtain sash. The pilots decompressed the cabin and opened the rear door before one of the crew pushed Landakula out. He left behind his gun and one shoe. Lacandula did not survive the jump. His remains were found in the forest, even though the money he stole was missing. It was suggested that his poor quality parachute initially deployed but later failed, sending him plummeting to earth. Helios Airways Flight 522. On August the 14th of 2005, Helios Airways Flight 522 was flying from Cyprus to Prague when it crashed in Greece, killing all 121 passengers and crew members. Investigations revealed that almost all the passengers and crew had become unconscious hours before the crash. Apparently, some technicians serviced the airplane before takeoff and forgot to change a key setting in its air conditioning system when they were through. This caused reduced oxygen levels and consequently mass unconsciousness of all the passengers and crew when the plane was airborne. Worse, both pilots misunderstood the problem when the warning alarm went off. The cabin crew knew that something was wrong when the aeroplane, which was an autopilot, continued ascending instead of descending when its oxygen mask automatically deployed. However, the crew could not contact the pilots or enter the cockpit because it was protected by locked bulletproof doors that had become a feature of airplanes after the 9/11 attacks. The flight continued on autopilot for 2 hours until it was intercepted by two Hellenic Air Force F-16s. One F-16 pilot reported seeing a flight attendant, later identified as Andreas Prodoma, enter the cockpit, but it was too late as the airplane soon ran out of fuel and crashed. Autopsies revealed that many of the crew members and passengers were alive, but unconscious when the plane crashed. So that's it for this week's video. Thank you so much for watching, and I really hope you enjoyed it. If you did, make sure to leave a like. Until the next video, goodbye.